Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you very much for being here. Today, we are going to talk about the disease called MORE. I recently was going through Nelson Nash's videos on YouTube. And you guys, if you haven't, you can go to YouTube and you can watch. There's a Nelson Nash channel, Nelson Nash Institute, I believe it's called. You can watch that channel. You can go to the infinitebanking.org website and you can grab a 10-hour course of Nelson's. He was the founder of the concept. And so hear it from the horse's mouth. So I was listening to Nelson videos and I recently heard him say, you can get yourself caught with the disease called MORE. And that's exactly what happened to Nelson in the 80s. He was buying land, he was making a bunch of money, he was buying more land, he was leveraged. And he was doing what all the real estate gurus said: leverage yourself, buy more land, flip more land, sell more land. Was it any different than people buying land or selling houses today, or leveraging every piece of equity they have in a house to go buy another house to do short-term rentals with, or long-term rentals, or whatever that might be? And I am very conservative by nature. I am not going to get caught with this disease called MORE, because MORE scares the bejesus out of me. I don't want to end up like Nelson. But it seems like so many people within the infinite banking concept that teach this concept, that are doing those things, they got caught with that disease, and that disease is swallowing them up, and it hasn't caught up to them yet. And it may catch up to them later. Some of them are doing it right and some of them aren't doing it right. But if we're going to take every ounce of equity out of our property and go buy more and more and more and more, we have to really think about what we're doing. Now, we could get caught if we're buying those things through our policy. Here's the thing. A lot of people are doing more and they're doing it through their policy, and they think that's okay. I'll just have every red cent borrowed against my policy and I'll go do more. I'll buy more of those rental properties because the bank isn't in control. I'm in control. So if I can't make those payments, not the end of the world. And that's great if we have a plan B and we're going to say, okay, we're going to, sell this property and get out of that. But we still have interest on those loans to pay. And if we're not going to pay the interest on those loans, that could actually hurt our policy long term. And a lot of people just don't get that because their agent isn't telling them that the interest on the loan is compounding from policy year to policy year. So if you're not paying the interest, that eventually is just going to eat up your policy. This is not free money, which is why Nelson said, don't steal the peas. Okay? A lot of people will also say, well, I can't start right now. Interest rates are too high. But they didn't want to start when interest rates were low because it was silly to have a policy and borrow against the money in the policy. They didn't want to pay 4% to borrow that money when they can go to the bank and get it for 2 or 3. So we didn't start the policy because banks were cheaper. Now we can't start the policy because interest rates are too high. People, what's perfect? What's perfect? When is the perfect time to start? I would love to know that answer. Nelson started when he got caught with the disease of MORE. He was a leverage to the hilt, and he decided he's going to start his policy. Now, why don't we take heed? Why don't we pay attention to that and go, geez, Nelson started his policy then. How did he do that? He beat Parkinson's law. Oh, that's a chapter in his book. Yes, it is. So he beat Parkinson's law. He gave up the luxuries to be able to move as much money into the policies as he could so that he could borrow against that and pay down the snakes and dragons. And when interest rates are 23%, paying down a loan at the bank and basically moving it over to a system that's 5, 6, and 8% is way better. There's a lot that goes around this story, but I want to keep it very, very simple, which means this is going to be a very, very short podcast. Watch what you're doing. I get wanting to grow and have all this cash flow coming in. I 100% get it. But even I have to slow myself down and say, do I have this disease of MORE? Because I could borrow against this property and I could borrow against that property and I could use all the equity in it and I could have all this cash flow coming in. But if the cash flow is not enough, if the cash flow is not enough to make all the payments, should something happen, then I get caught in a situation like Nelson's. So many of us have sat and learned about infinite banking and about the power and about the control and the liquidity of the money and how awesome it all is. But a lot of us seem to have forgotten how it started. It started because Nelson got caught with the disease of more. And he was lucky enough to have life insurance to go to. But then he realized that he could buy more of it and design it in the way that we design it. Don't just take his advice on how to structure a policy, how to buy a policy, but we've gotten to the point where the disease of more has carried through on design structure of policy design. It's carried through on real estate. It's carried through on toys and everything else. And I don't love equity sitting in my home. It's not my favorite thing, but I have it because I don't want to have everything financed to the point where what happens if Mary Jo is in ICU and I can't do podcasts? I can't sit behind a computer and do meetings all day. My income is derived from me. I don't have this entourage of agents that are creating all my income. That's derived from me helping people. What happens if I can't be there? I need to make sure I'm not so leveraged that I can't make my house payment. I can't make my land payment. I can't make whatever. Somebody has to run it. If I have rental properties, somebody needs to run those rental properties, right? Who is that going to be? If I'm in ICU, is that something that's easy for my family to do? And so I'm always looking at that worst case scenario situation because I don't want to get caught. And it seems to me like everybody thinks the roses are always going to be red. Everything's going to work great. And that's fantastic. And I like to think that too. I don't think a lot of negative thoughts about stuff stopping, but I am going to prepare to some extent for worst case scenario. So think about that as you've listened to this and just sit and ponder that. What is this disease of more? And have you caught it? You probably haven't if you are a client of mine because I'm super conservative. I'm not going to push you. I'm not going to, have you do a bunch of things that I wouldn't do. And so chances are you're doing business with me because you're equally as conservative. But if you're listening to this and you're not a client of mine and you're maybe a client of somebody else's or you're an agent, I'm just going to encourage you to go listen to Nelson's videos and check yourself. Just check yourself. Are you trying to leverage so quickly that you could get caught in the process? And if you don't care about that, that's fine. But that's not me. That's not how I operate. But I love that Nelson talked about it because a lot of people just poo-poo over what happened to him. And they just want to look at how he got out of it, which was great. But how about we not get in it? That's kind of where I'm at. Okay, let me know if you have comments, questions, concerns. I am happy to answer you. Email me, maryjo@withoutthebank.com, or you can go to themjhotline.com, leave me a message, but make sure you grab your book, Life Without the Bank. Grab Nelson's book, BYOB. You can get them as a bundle on my website. We'll get those sent out to you, and then you can sit and have a meeting with me. So let me know if you need anything. Otherwise, you have a fantastic rest of your day.